Hey guys, we are going to take some notes on production possibility curves, and I'm going to try to show you my PowerPoint as I'm doing this. This is try number 5. So we'll see. I'm using Google Hangouts to try to live stream this to YouTube and then embed it in my website, in my Canvas. So we'll see if it works. Cross your fingers. Here we go. So what we're going to talk about today is production possibility curves. So hopefully you have some pen and paper out so you can take some notes as I'm going through this PowerPoint and kind of talking you through what's happening. So the first thing I want to talk about is the difference between productive efficiency and allocative efficiency. So productive efficiency means that you are getting the most produced from your scarce resources. So this means like you are the best widget producer in the world. You can make more widgets out of 1 ton of steel than any other widget producer in the world. You can produce more than anybody else from the same amount of resources. That would be productive efficiency. Allocative efficiency takes productive efficiency one step farther, and it says you have to be producing what people want. So not only are you productively efficient, getting the most out of your scarce resources, you are producing things that people want efficiently. So how are they different? Productive efficiency doesn't care if you're making things that people want. Allocative efficiency says you're producing efficiently and you're only producing things that people want. So which is better? Allocatively efficient is better. So the next thing we want to talk about is the difference between marginal benefit and marginal cost. So in economics, the word marginal means the next additional. So when we talk about marginal benefit, what we're looking at is the benefit derived from producing an additional unit of a product. So we're saying to produce one more unit, what would be the benefit of that, of producing that next additional unit? And marginal cost would say, what would be the cost of producing one more of the product? So you want to continue to increase your production as long as your marginal benefit is what? Less than, greater than, equal to your marginal cost. The answer would be equal to. You want to increase your production, continue to add to your production as long as your marginal benefit is equal to your marginal cost. As soon as your marginal cost is greater, you should reduce your production because you have exceeded society's desire for the good. You've become allocatively inefficient. You've over allocated your resources. So you should draw back your production. If your marginal benefit is greater, then you're still deriving some benefit from increasing your production, and you should continue to add resources until your marginal benefit is equal to your marginal cost. So now let's go on to the main topic, which is a production possibility curve. So what is a production possibility curve? A production possibility curve is a diagram that shows the combination of two goods and services that a country, society, economy can produce. It's any two goods and services. And then the reason that we talk about production possibility curves is because it illustrates the concept of opportunity cost and trade-offs. So we've been talking about what opportunity costs and trade-offs are in class, and this is a diagram that illustrates that concept of opportunity cost, which is what you give up, and a trade-off, which is in order to get something, you have to give something up. So we need to know the assumptions or the rules of a production possibility curve. So there are 5 assumptions to the production possibility curve. The first one is that only 2 products can be produced. So these can be any 2 products. It can be, capital goods and consumer goods. That's what you see most of the time. It can be, cupcakes and, water bottles. It can be Nintendos and Xboxes. It can be anything. It's long as it's only 2 products. The next one is all resources are fixed. So remember, anytime you see the word resources, think production possibility curves. No, I'm sorry. Think factors of production. Sorry, I have production possibility curves in the mind. So anytime you see the word resources, think factors of production. So your resources are land, labor, capital, and entrepreneurship. So the four factors, so what I mean by the resources are fixed, I mean that the amount of natural resources that we have is going to be the amount of natural resources we have. We're not going to discover more oil. We're not going to get more coal. The amount of natural resources we have is what we have. We're not going to have mass immigration. We're not going to produce more capital goods. And the businesses that we have are the businesses that we have. The next thing is that all technology is fixed. The same idea as before. We're not going to invent any new great technology. The next thing is that we have to use all of our resources fully and efficiently. Okay, so we are not going to waste anything. We're going to be allocatively and productively efficient. We're going to make sure we're producing what people want and that we're getting the most out of our scarce resources. And the last assumption is ceteris paribus, which means all else remains equal. And this means that if we lift one of the assumptions, that we are going to only change one assumption at a time. So here we can see the production possibility curve. We're going to talk about all of the different kinds of points that you see on this production possibility curve. The first thing I want you to notice is that on this production possibility curve, your y-axis is labeled guns, your x-axis is labeled butter. So guns typically represents the government and butter represents the people. This is a classic economic example that you will see a lot. And this is what we're going to use for today. So any points on the curve mean a full and efficient use of resources. We're not wasting anything. We're using everything we have. This is where we want to be producing anywhere on the curve. So the points that we have here are A, B, C, and D. They could be other points. We could have a point somewhere between point A and B, like right here, or between point B and C. So we can have points anywhere on the curve. These are all of the possible combinations of guns and butter that we can produce in this economy. The next kind of point that we have is a point that's under the curve, a point like F. This is an inefficient use of resources. This means that we could be producing more. We could be producing at point B, but we are currently producing less than we're able to because we are wasting our resources. This is called unemployment. So when we think of the word unemployment, we always think of labor, and F could certainly be unemployment of labor, but it probably is it probably is some unemployment of labor, but it could also be unemployment of capital goods, meaning that we have the capital goods, we're just not using them. The next kind of point would be point E, and this is a point outside of the curve or above the curve. So point E is a future possibility. We would love to be able to produce at point E, but we're not able to produce there currently. So it's a future possibility. It's desirable, but not currently possible. So how can we get to point E? The way to get to point E is to actually shift the curve to the right or outward so that the curve becomes larger and then will encompass point E. And we would do that by getting more resources. We would need more resources to be able to produce 3 guns and 3 butters, which would be at point E. So let's look at these 2 questions. If we move from A to B, what are we giving up? We go from A to B, we're going from 3 guns and 0 butters to 2 guns and 2 butters. So we are giving up 1 gun and gaining 2 butters. So our opportunity cost is 1 gun. So our next question is, can we move from F to C without an opportunity cost? Remember that point F is below the production possibility curve. So can we move from F to C without an opportunity cost? And the answer there is yes, we can. At point F, we have the resources available to produce at a point like C, but we are currently not using those resources. So we have the land, the labor, the capital to be able to produce more than 1 gun and 1 butter, but we are currently not using them. So all we have to do is put our resources back to work, and then we'll be able to produce at a point like C. We're not having to give up any more resources or discover more resources. We're just having to put the resources that we already have back to work. So to me, this is probably the most difficult thing to understand. This is the cost of the curve. I have kind of a lot of animation, so hopefully you'll be able to follow along here. So we're looking at what kind of cost does the production possibility curve have? And you can tell what kind of cost the production possibility curve has by the shape of the curve. So the shape of this curve is a bowed out curve. It kind of looks like a bow of a bow and arrow. So we call it bowed out. So let's look at these 3 questions and it'll help us figure out the cost. If we go from D to C, what is the opportunity cost? You can see that if we go from D to C, we are gaining 1 gun. But what are we giving up? You can see right here that we are giving up 1/4 butter, just a tiny bit of butter, but we are gaining 1 gun. That's a pretty good trade-off, a little bit of butter for 1 whole gun or 1 unit of guns. So our next question is we go from C to B. So we're still gaining 1 gun, and we are giving up 3/4 butter. So we had to give up more butter in order to gain this gun. And our last one is if we move from B to A. So again, we still only gained 1 gun, but we had to give up 2 whole butters. So what is happening here? We had to give up more and more butter each time. The first time we gave up, sorry, wrong way. The first time we gave up 1/4, then 3/4, then 2. So what kind of cost does this curve have? This curve has what we call an increasing cost. The first time to gain a gun, we gave up 1/4. The next time to gain 1 gun, we gave up 3/4. And the last time to gain 1 gun, we gave up 2 butters. So every time we're having to give up increasing amounts of butter to gain the same amounts of gun. We have an increasing cost. So could it work going the other way if we went from A to D? The answer is yes, but what we would have to do is we would have to add a point because we don't have a point showing 1 butter. So we'd have to add a point about halfway between point A and B. And it would work. We have an increase in cost going both ways. And like I said, you can tell that by the shape of the curve. So what would a production possibility curve look like if it had a constant cost? So an increasing cost looks like a bow. It has a bowed out shape. So what would a constant cost have? It has a straight line. This is called a budget line or a straight line constant cost production possibility curve. And every time as we go from A to B, we gave up 1. Went from B to C, we gave up 1. We went from C to D, we gave up 1. Every time we give up the same amount. So it is a constant cost curve. It gives us a straight line. The next thing we want to talk about is shifting the production possibility curve. So our production possibility curve can shift to the right or to the left. So the production possibility curve shifts to the right when we have an increase in resources or when we discover new resources. So it shifts to the right if we get more land, labor, capital, or entrepreneurship or new technology. And you can see what's happening is the whole curve is shifting to the right. We're getting closer to point E. So point E will become part of the production possibility curve. And so we will, that point will eventually be part of our production possibility curve, and that becomes a current possibility when we get there. So that is how we eventually get to point E. Then our curve can also shift to the left. When the curve shifts to the left, it means that resources have been destroyed. So like, for example, when a hurricane comes through Houston and factories are destroyed, then the curve will shift to the left. So what do you think is better, to have a point below the curve or to shift to the left? So when there's a point below the curve, the resources are still available. They're just not being used. So when there's a point below the curve, we have the factory, we're just not using the factory. When we shift to the left, the factory has actually been destroyed. So I like to think of this in terms of labor, because I think we can relate to labor, because that's what we are. We are workers. So I like to think of it like this. When we have a point below the curve, you lost your job. When we shift to the left, you died. Which is better, unemployment or death? Which is easier to recover from, unemployment or death? Exactly. Just like for you, unemployment is easier to recover from. That is true for the economy also. Unemployment is easier to recover from. It's easier to put your workers back to work than it is to get new workers and train them and give them, and have on-the-job training. So having a point below the curve is much better than shifting the curve to the left. So this is the last thing that we're going to look at today. And this is asking, at which point will the production possibility curve grow the fastest? So when I talk about grow the fastest, what I mean is shifting to the right. So the first thing that you should notice is that I changed the axis labels. On your y-axis, I have consumer goods. On the x-axis, I have capital goods. So at point B, we are producing 2 capital goods and 2 consumer goods. And at point C, we have 2 3/4 capital goods and 1 consumer good. So at which point will we grow the fastest? The answer is point C. Why will we grow faster at point C than at point B? Well, that's because at point C, we are producing more capital goods. What causes the curve to shift to the right? Land, labor, capital, and entrepreneurship and technology. So if we are producing one of the things that makes the curve shift to the right, the more we produce of that thing, the faster we will shift to the right. So at point C, we are producing more capital goods, which makes the curve shift to the right. Therefore, we will shift to the right or grow faster. Will the production possibility curve shift to the right at point B? Yes, it will. It will just shift to the right at a slower rate than if we produce at a point like C. If you have any questions, make sure you write them down and you bring them to class with you on Monday. We'll be doing a few handouts to make sure that you understood what was happening and to kind of have some a little advanced thinking about production possibility curves.